Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, and today I'm hanging out with Urin from On the Shoulders of Heroes. It's his own campaign setting. There is a Kickstarter ongoing. There's some links down in the description. In the links, you can find the Kickstarter. You can find the Facebook page. On the Shoulders of Heroes. It's his own campaign setting. Sorry about that, guys. Gets me every once in a while. But in the description, as I said, you can find the Kickstarter, the Facebook page, as well as there is a link to sample pages from.
Sorry about that, guys. Gets me every once in a while.
Oh, is that you now?
Yeah, that was me. Sorry, I clicked it away.
That's okay. But there's also a link to the sample page that you can find as well, or a Google Docs where there's a bunch of sample pages, and the layout looks really slick, really cool. I like it visually. It is for 3rd edition or Pathfinder. So, but there's probably a bunch of stuff that you can actually incorporate and steal from there. And what I'm interested in is talking to you about the actual campaign setting and the games you've run there. So how are you today, sir?
I am very good. Thank you very much. And I hope you're well, too.
As any better, I would be twins.
even with the cold over there.
Yeah, it is a little cold. We had a little bit of snow. I did a little shoveling yesterday. But one of the great things is my son's like 17. So he did like 3/4 of the shoveling before I even got out there and got started. So that part was good.
That's good. Having children put them to work, you know.
The Shoulders of Heroes, how did the campaign come about? Was it something that you guys had envisioned as a product from the beginning, or was this basically your home game, your home setting that you've brought forward?
Yeah, to be honest, it's more the latter than the former. We never really, well, when I first made it, it was like a yay big campaign map in Microsoft Paint, and I made it after I read one of the old school Dungeons and Dragons books I got in the US on one of my visits, and I thought that style was so cool that I wanted to make a campaign setting in that same style. So I worked on it myself, and my friends liked it very much as well, and everybody just started getting involved, and we wrote more and more, and we expanded on it. And at one point, we decided to get artists involved because we liked to have it visually in front of us as well. We thought that would enrich our gaming experience. So we got some really cool artists involved, if I say so myself. And from there, after we started seeing the book come together, we thought, well, this is too cool to keep just to ourselves. So we want to share it with the world. And yeah, that's what we're doing now, basically. With the Kickstarter.
I would say the really good thing about what you guys are doing too is you already have a prototype book, in the sense that you have a finished product. Because I saw your interview with Mr. Trask and he was showing it off. So, I mean, maybe you guys have some things to refine still or whatever. But for the most part, it's a done product. So people that back it, it's already essentially made. So what are the selling points for On the Shoulder of Heroes? I mean, because a lot of people throw around old school, but like, what does that really mean? What does it mean to you? And how did that unfold in your game?
Well, there's a couple of things I think that our campaign does that modern campaigns do not do. I think one of the terms I like to use is magical realism, as in that we want to keep things, we want to make things make sense, but we also want there to be some magic and some adventure. For example, we have this world that's sort of I think pre-medieval in its setting, in its time period. So travel is really hard. So the journey is part of the game, and that's part of the adventure. We think that's very important. We have there's language barriers between the peoples. We like to expand on the language. There's more language rules. Not everybody can read in our world, which is also a big thing, I think, because in our world, people mostly started reading, because they had to read the Bible, and there's not really any Bibles in our world, so people can't read, basically. There's we went back to the original, more of the original races, races that are very familiar, like humans, dwarfs, elves. There's some new ones in there as well, playable gnolls, bugbears, but the large majority of the world will feel very familiar, I think.
So the setting itself, actual play, is it more feudal, or what kind of mythologies are you drawing from?
Well, we call ourselves Vikingesque on Facebook, and I think that's the style that we're going for. Sort of the old Scandinavian feel of like wooden huts, small farmsteads that are like pinpointed here and there. Like everything is very remote. There's no large power structures. There are no guilds. There are rulers of countries, but they rule them very loosely and mostly give smaller groups or families reign of specific areas and delegate their rule.
So are there any notable like big bads in the world?
Well, it's called On the Shoulders of Heroes. So one of the points we wanted to make is that the heroes are the important thing, and the heroes can be the player characters, but there's also 9 NPCs who we worked out in a lot of detail and are in the back of the book, one of each alignment. And the bad guy, one of the bad guys actually is called Joranash, based on myself, just as Gygax used to do with like naming characters after his players. So Joranash is this lich lord who lost his mother when he was very young, and he tried to resurrect her as he was an apprentice necromancer, but failed. And after that, he basically went mad, and he envisioned a place where he could use the powers of death to make the world better for everyone, and that there would be no more loss, no more grief. And he has this undead, very small undead empire somewhere hidden away in the mountains. So that's, I think, one of the main bad guys. There's a picture of him, I think, in the examples as well.
Oh, cool. So how long were you guys playing in the setting before you decided to bring it out to the world?
We've been working on the setting for about 6-7 years right now, but we really started on it. Well, we started taking it seriously, I think, about 3 to 4 years ago. And I still did it. I still worked a regular job as well, and the job just took too much time and creativity and too much of my energy away. So I decided just to focus full time on this project, and I started doing that in the spring of this year.
Excellent! Congratulations with that. And the name of your company, what is it? It's Windmill Slam. What is?
Yeah, we're Windmill Slam Games.
That's it. Where does that come? Where's the origins there?
Well, I like all sorts of geeky stuff. So I'm also a Magic the Gathering player, and I used to be a Magic the Gathering judge. And a Windmill Slam is a term coined in Magic the Gathering, where you draw. I don't know. Do you play Magic at all?
I do not.
Yeah, all right. Well, in Magic the Gathering, you have this deck of cards, and when you draw a certain card and you're really happy with it, that's just the card you needed, either in the draft format where you're passing packs around, or whether you're drawing in the game itself. And you draw the perfect card, you like draw the card from your deck and you slam it on the table. That's called a Windmill Slam, that little movement there.
I gotcha.
And also windmills, because we're Dutch, it works on many levels.
I see that. I see that, because immediately my mind went to the fact that you guys are Dutch over there, and the windmills. But I did not realize that there was the Magic the Gathering connotation as well. So that's really cool. So how many games are you playing in now?
In Dungeons and Dragons games?
Yeah.
To be honest, any games. Well, at the moment we're playing a Pathfinder campaign. I really like Pathfinder, and I'm playing a Curse of Strahd I'm DMing a Curse of Strahd campaign for a friend of mine. Just the two of us.
Oh, okay, so you're doing a solo.
Well, yeah, with one of my with one player, yeah. Yeah, I think you got to know each other really well to pull it off, and there's got to be a lot of trust, but it can also be a lot of fun, and especially with a horror setting like Ravenloft, it feels more tense when it's just the two of us sitting in a room with like a candle. My wife is sort of concerned, like thinking I'm going on dates, but it can get really tense. It's fun, and and a Pathfinder campaign, and at the moment, that's it. But we're looking into getting into more 5th edition campaigns. I've been enjoying 5th edition a lot. So,
what advice would you give someone who's running for one player for a solo?
well, I think you can only pull it off if there's a lot of trust between the player and the DM. It's and I think you both have to be on the same level when it comes to what you're comfortable with in terms of role playing. In a bigger group, I think it's easier if there's discrepancies between the players' level of interacting with the DM. But when it's just the two of you, you basically have to entertain each other. One player has to run the group, and the other he's playing a group. He's not playing one character because I didn't want to convert the book to a one-player campaign. We wanted to see how the game mechanics work and how the group mechanics work. So he's playing an entire party, which he made himself, and he's doing some light role-playing in between, and I'm doing some role-playing for my NPCs, and it's fun. We have laughs, and I think you can very easily do it if both the player and the DM are into it.
So he's playing like 4 or 5 characters at the same time?
Yeah, he's playing 5, actually.
Is he role playing all 5 characters?
He's got some favorites who he role plays more than others. He's got this dwarven female rogue, and he does like the Scottish dwarven accent for her. And he's got a cleric for which he rolled very poor stats, so he's called Little Joe, and he's the team mascot. And he likes playing Little Joe as well. But not all characters get as much spotlight time. But he does think it's a big advantage that when you're playing by yourself, you can sort of make it as you can play the characters as wild or crazy as you want, and they can pull each other back in line, and you don't have to feel like a bastard when you're doing something strange or something odd, because it would make sense in character, and it would sort of remove you from the rest of the party because you're also playing the rest of the party, so you're always still playing the game.
So it sounds exhausting, actually. Does he role play with himself?
Yeah, well, I role play with him as well, but I played. We play tested some of our On the Shoulders of Heroes campaigns because with my buddy Dan, who is the co-writer and the visual, the guy who does the visuals, the image engineering as we call it, and we role play together via Roll20 as well, and he also plays an entire group of characters in Roll20, and I think it's kind of fun to play with just one player. It's kind of refreshing, and it's fun for the player because you're always in the spotlight, and yeah, there's some advantages about it,
Yeah, I have one game that I run weekly, and sometimes it ends up being we've never done one player. It's usually at least 2, but the party's 2 to 4, and but it's just the one character. So when there's 2 players, they just play 2 characters, and that's it. It's just it's a duo for that adventure, and we work it out from there. But it is a lot of fun when it's a little more intimate like that. Although I personally I feel like playing with one person might be too intimate, and it seems like it would be a ton of work, and could be really intense, I guess is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I when I started, because we just picked up the Curse of Strahd from the available adventures in the shop, and I just thought I'd grab one because it looked cool, but it's very centers very heavily on exploration and role playing, and on more on those aspects and actual combat. And I was sort of hoping it would be like more combat related, so we can get more practice with that. But now, if once I started, I want to get through it, and we're having a lot of fun with it. So it works. But yeah, I do think you have to be very familiar and very comfortable with each other. But I know the guy for what is it now? And I know him for about 15 years as well. So he started playing when I just started playing. So yeah, and we both don't have any shame when it comes to role playing characters. So.
Well, and that's great, and that speaks to the greatness of the hobby in itself. Like, you guys have been doing this together for 15 years. I have friends like that, and people in Nerdarchy like that too, and that's like the amazing thing about this hobby. Like, you don't get that in some other hobbies the way you do here. Like, these people, they almost become like friends and family. From the silly little thing we like to do. So Jonathan has a question. How would you run a Cthulhu-based 5e game? I don't like Cthulhu as a role-playing game. I just don't, because I feel like it's so hard to respect the mythology of Cthulhu and the way those stories are told in a role-playing game, because the point of a Cthulhu story is almost essentially about losing.
Yeah, there's no heroes in a Cthulhu setting. There's just people who lose slowly.
And any edition of D&D is going to be even worse for Cthulhu, because Cthulhu is the worst when you want to play the monster killer, because that's not really how that mythos works.
Now, I think that when you're playing a horror game, you want to keep the rules very simple, but then Cthulhu is very much based on losing sanity, and that makes things more complicated. So it's sort of a double-edged sword.
And guys, if you have questions, feel free to ask them. Just remember to put question before them. We're going to be chatting the whole time. And so do you have any favorite moments that you want to pick out from on the shoulders of heroes from your campaign? Or let's start with that, because I also have another question.
All right. Like favorite moments from when I was playing the campaign myself, or favorite parts of the book?
No, from when you're playing, either as the GM or player.
Well, one of the things we introduced and which we made, which we use a lot in the setting, is random encounters on the way. And as a DM personally, I know that this is a very that people can think about this in two ways. They can either love random encounters or they hate random encounters. And I'm in the love random encounters. I'm on the love random encounters train, because they make me as a DM think about why the players would encounter something in the world or on their trip, and it helps me make the world feel more alive and come to life. So for me, one of the favorite moments I had in the campaign was when the players were they were making this trip from one big city to the other, and they had to travel, I think, for like 7 days or something along a lake. And I randomly rolled that they would encounter an agitar, which is one of the monsters in the book. And they encountered this agitar really close to an inn, which was located to accommodate travelers on their way. And I made up this story about this family in the inn having this agitar behind their house and it haunting their ancestral land, and them keeping it at bay with like small gifts and offerings. And they had this little stable boy's son who the players met and who they befriended. And the boy saw the cool heroes, and he thought, well, I want to be a hero, and I'm going to defeat this monster which has been plaguing my family. So in the morning, the party awoke with the screams of the innkeeper's wife, who was missing her son, and the boy had had ran to the forest to defeat the agitar by himself. And the party had to deviate from their travel plans and had to make up a new. They basically set up their own adventure to save the boy from the forest, and I thought that was really cool. And it makes the world come alive both to the players and to the DM, but that was all random.
I actually like random encounters as well. More recently, I've just been too lazy to make up my own own tables and charts. So I was really happy when in Xanathar's Guide they provided a bunch, and they're getting closer to what I want, because like you can find tons of charts and tables and even programs online, but it's all like, what level is the party, and then it'll give you random things, and I'm like, I don't want that. I just want, random, based on the terrain. So we got a little bit better with Xanathar's Guide, because it does have them all based on terrain, and then it breaks them by tier. So I'm like, all right, so I can roll an extra die, and it does make it kind of random. So that being said, in the campaign setting, have you included a lot of random encounter charts?
Well, we have been making random encounter charts over the course of the year, and you can find them all on our Facebook page. We're probably not going to be including them in the actual book, but you can print them out really easily and just carry them along in a folder. And there's random encounter, like we call them the non-combat 100 non-combat random encounters, and we have them for almost every type of terrain. I think from underground to cold forest to desert to, well, pretty much everything. And it's all sorts of weird things that you can have the party meet, from like magical clouds to merchants, pretty much anything, and to tickle your DM imagination.
Well, and that kind of answers the question from Fantasy Grounds College. He wanted to know if you use random event encounters instead of combats, and clearly you got whole tables of them. So yes.
Yeah, we have some monsters in the setting, of course, as well, and I do really like. I do really think combat is one of the fun parts of D&D 3.5. So when I run a campaign myself, I do make sure that there's plenty of stuff to explore and to fight as well.
So Shaman has a question, and I'm running my first game, Lost Minds. All my players are brand new, and one of them has a really high perception, so she finds all the traps with passive wisdom of 17. Should I ignore it? Now, to me, this question is actually system and edition agnostic, because what you're really asking is, because you feel like a part of the adventure isn't getting experienced by the players, or they're not falling victim to the traps because of this one character. But at the same time, I don't think you should penalize the player because they made their character to do a certain thing. So I would allow it, and if you wanted to add maybe some tougher traps, you could, but for the most part, be like, no, this character is really good at that, and maybe hopefully, what I would like to see is maybe the players try and find creative ways to use the traps against the enemies, or maybe you add an encounter where the traps are, so they know that it's there, but maybe the enemies do too. Then it becomes like a hazard or an obstacle. So there's always ways to do things. Oh, thank you, Mr. Trask. Appreciate that for the super chat. And he says, go support the Kickstarter, guys. Go check it out. The art is fantastic. It's all black and white, line drawn art. Who does the art for you guys?
We've got a couple of artists. The lead artist is Eogan Kerrigan, who you can find online on his blog spot, I think. He's an Irish artist. He does a lot of trolls, which he does really awesomely. He's sort of got the exaggerated Jim Henson style mostly for most of the work he does. But also he does all these subtle little decorations in all of his artwork, and everything just looks very detailed and very amazing. We have a Polish artist, Blażej Szymanski. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Who did most of the banners of the book, because we've got page banners on top and on bottom of the pages. And he did some of the Hobgoblin related artwork, because we felt like we needed something a bit more Asian, Japanese style looking for that. So he did most of that as well. One of my friends did some of the artwork, Tim de Vries. He did the gods. He has this very specific, I'd say very stylized way of drawing, and he made the gods look like they're old glass like how do you say the glass paneled windows in a church. He made them sort of look like these old Gothic decorations, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, the stained glass.
Yeah, stained glass. That's the word I was looking for. And we've got one more Dutch artist who did a couple of things to help us out, who I used to work with, called René Penrus. And that's the team, basically, of artists.
Score. So what do you think like defines a Viking setting in your mind? Like what elements are essential?
I do think that the isolation and the loneliness, the small bastions of civilization are really important. I do think that it's very important to consider things that are really normal, really common for us, and are even common in a Dungeons and Dragons setting, like travel or communication can be a lot harder in a world that's a bit more harsh and primitive. So I'd say that those things are really important to our setting.
Do you make up your own gods or are you using Scandinavian gods?
That's an interesting question. We used gods. You made up some of our own gods, and some we used from the old Scandinavian gods, as in the pantheon before Thor and yeah, those guys, the old pagan gods. Some of them are also featured in the old Dungeons and I think 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons deities and demigods book.
Yeah, that is I think that was a fan favorite, and a lot of people missed that book. And I guess someone had just recently asked if we thought they would be bringing that back, and I would probably be pretty surprised if they did, or it's probably low on the priority list. Though
Well,
they're always fun to read.
Well, they do make they do advertise for their own campaign settings a lot, so maybe they see an opportunity there.
So all right, so Fantasy Ground College wants to know how much ingenuity and tech do you allow in your world?
Well, we allow that's I allow some ingenuity. I allow all ingenuity. When players come up with a creative solution to anything, unless it's very silly, which is rare, I will simply allow it. Just because I think that they're the heroes, and that if they find a creative way to solve something, that's cool. As in tech, there's no firearms in the setting. There are crossbows. There is some black powder. One of my characters wanted to make a gnome blast miner, so he wanted to invent black powder for his specific tribe, and I allowed that. But in general, that's where the tech stops. So really primitive black powder. I guess that's it.
Well, and that's a lot more than some campaigns will allow. I used to be dead set against it for the longest time, and then I was like, I get tired of playing the same kind of game all the time, and eventually started incorporating black powder, elements of steampunk.
Well, I wouldn't introduce it myself, but if someone is really set on it and they're really enthused about this character, they've made this background on it, then I'm willing to meet them in the middle. I guess I'm a softie.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing wrong with that in the name of fun. So, Gonzo the Great, do you have a second job available for those of us struggling with amazing content coming out from Kickstarter? LO, amazing art on the book. Can't wait. And I think that one's directed more at me. And I do some weeks more than others will end up with like a bunch of people on here from Kickstarters. And I feel bad for the audience because there's so many awesome things coming out. But it's a buffet. Eat what you want. And for us as Nerdarchy, we just want to get the word out and let people know what's out there. So, Tucker Author, how well did TSR Wizards of the Coast do with their adaptations of the Scandinavian gods, in your opinion?
That's an interesting question. I think that they everything is going to be simplified. They only have a text box that is yay big to to write an entire like hundreds of years of history. So you're gonna have to dumb it down and water it down and make it palatable, I think. But what I liked about the old deities and demigods book is that there was so much of it, and more of the obscure things as well, like not just the gods that you saw that you see everywhere. And sometimes you have to go quality over quantity, and sometimes you have to go quantity over quality. And I think they did all right.
And depending on which version you got like the Cthulhu Mythos before they got stopped,
really cool.
stopped the lawsuit. But they had, I believe there was Arthurian mythos in there as well, Egyptian, Greek, of course, and Norse and Celtic. And so they had there was definitely a bunch. That's just going from the from memory. And I just remember there was only 5 gods in the whole book that had straight 25s, and like that was the thing. But that was one of the more fun books to look through, and both covers were amazing. Like I really dug the old school cover with the two wizards kind of battling via proxy, and then later when they came out with it, again, did they change the name to Legend and Lores when they did the second time and put Odin on the cover?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure actually. Could be.
But that cover. Oh, the painted one.
Yeah, I think I have that one as well. It's it looks amazing. I think I really like that. I like the pencil style, like the stylized drawing in black and white. I like those, but I also really like the really colorful painting style. But it's a lot more expensive to get art for it, so we couldn't afford it right now.
You're getting compliments on your David Bowie shirt.
Thanks.
Sure. And I had pointed that out earlier too. I had spotted that right away. Evil Silly Putty, how do you handle sea voyages if you do those? And I would add to that, is that an important part of the campaign setting? Because I think when a lot of us think about Vikings, we think about sea voyages and raiders and reaving.
Yeah, there's not much. We thought it made sense not to have too much raiding between people going on, because it's a pretty dangerous and isolated world. So you've got all those monsters running out there, orcs and goblins. It doesn't really make sense to go out and raid other people. We thought it made more sense for people to come together and fight a common evil instead of fighting each other. So that's one point. The other point, sea travel. I do think that sea travel is important in a campaign setting. One of the playable races, actually, the Tro, are sort of like fish people, and they're basically accepted because they are such great travelers, and I know so much about the water and the sea and the currents. When the players run the campaign, I probably just roll for random encounters as I would on land, but fewer random encounters because everybody loves a pirate ambush or something like that. But we don't introduce special new specific rules for sea travel in the book. So we don't do that.
So speaking of races, what are the races you introduce?
Well, there's 12 playable races. There's let me get them from the top of my head. I actually have my book right here, so I can. Now there's for humans, of course. That's the most common race. Among races, there's bugbears, because I always thought bugbears are really out of place as goblinoids, if that makes sense. Because there's goblins and there's hobgoblins and then there's bugbears, but they're not called goblins. So I thought I'd make them this separate race. They're kind of sort of based like on Native Americans, like very loosely. They used to live in this very peaceful jungle-esque part of the continent, which is heated by thermal vents. And then the hobgoblins came, and the hobgoblins, they had military superiority, and they captured them, and they forced them into slavery. So you can still use them as like the hobgoblin bruisers, or you can play them as escaped slaves, or whatever you prefer as a player. I've heard some interesting background stories of people playing escaped bugbear slaves, making their way in the world. So there's dwarfs, there's elves. We got gnomes, but we sort of revamped gnomes. Our gnomes are more like the sturdy Danny DeVito-esque type of gnomes, who do a lot of digging, who are very sort of secluded, kind of xenophobic. They're not the fairy type of magical tingle like 5th edition gnomes. They're sort of more like the harsh, underground, tough gnomes. We have gnolls, which we sort of redone like African wild dogs. So they're really sort of like gypsies who travel the northern lands, looking for odd jobs, telling people their fortune. Kind of like how World of Warcraft does them as well. We've got halflings. We've got a bunch of other half folk. We've got half dwarfs, half giants, half elves. we got a bunch, and we got, of course, the troll, which are the fish folk.
Sweet. And someone had also asked, Duel 810, what about playable classes? So I think you guys have tweaked those a little bit as well, right?
We did a few minor tweaks on some of them, but we introduced a few of our. We basically combined a couple of skills into new skills, like Pathfinder did, because we felt that some skills were heavily underutilized, and therefore people weren't taking them, but they are can be kind of important for the game. So we combined them into other skills. But we'd like hide and move silently. We combined to stealth, stuff like that, and listen and spot into perception, to make it feel less taxing on your skill. On your skill points, if you want to be very good at both hearing and listening. A few minor tweaks, but for the rest, most of the all of the player handbook classes got like expanded background stories. Some of them got original traits, and some of them got minor adjustments. Like, for example, bards. We allow bards to find traps. We allow rangers to find traps. Very minor stuff.
Cool. I just love the fact that you made a race based off of Danny DeVito. So
yeah, I actually when I got the artwork done, I actually I always make a little folder with like inspirational pictures of like I want to go in this direction, and then Eogan takes it from there, and I was like, yeah, for gnomes, I want them to be like small hairy guys with like bald on top, and they gotta have like furry ears, and let's do Danny DeVito. and he was very enthusiastic about that, I think. But yeah,
so,
no, we want
so
to
they
make.
kind of feel a little Nordic trollish.
Yeah, I think the half giants are more the trollish. They've got the big horns, and they're more. If you want to go in that direction, like the strong bruiser character, you have to go there. For gnomes, you sort of have to go like the small set, ground based druid character.
So Oxter, thinking about how to train your dragon, do you have any interesting slant on dragon mythology in the Nordic setting?
We have some dragon background in it. We don't have. We don't go into it too deeply at this moment. We only had so much room in the book, and we wanted to. We wanted to do a broad introduction of the setting first before we go into too much detail. There are going to be, I think, some cool dragon variants in our first monster compendium, which we hope to do after we've done this Kickstarter.
KB, you said earlier you use realistic magic. Actually, I think realistic magic is like a phrase that Joran coined to describe the setting, right?
Yeah,
More
magic
so than speaking to the magic itself.
No, we don't. No, people have magic actually. We didn't want to take that away. Only dwarves don't have magic because we didn't want any dwarves with pointy wizard hats running around. So dwarves can't do magic. It's one of the biggest racial tweaks I think we've done.
Oh, so the dwarves do not magic.
No, the background behind that is that their body is too dense to actually allow the arcane flow to be manipulated by them. So dwarves cannot do magic. Half dwarves can, but dwarves, they're just not able to.
So it's like second edition.
Yeah, that's one of the old school things we went back to. But they can do divine magic because the gods can channel magic through anything, but they don't do arcane magic.
So in your setting, how do you reconcile, or do you even do, like, dwarves are traditionally known for making magic items and making items of power, which it was always like the odd part about the early editions where they couldn't actually wield magic, but they made the best magic stuff.
Yeah, that's the dwarves have a magical metal. Actually, there's this very rare magical metal that allows even non-magic users to craft magic items out of it.
Sorry, I just get distracted by that's what I wanted to see. So Fantasy Ground Cottage is another question. How much superstition do you use in your campaign?
A lot, actually. I think superstition is something that was really common, and especially in a world as complicated as a fantasy setting with all sorts of monsters and all sorts of things, people are going to see strange things and they're going to believe all sorts of strange things. So I try to get a lot of that. Let me give you an example. For example, in the demo adventure that we were working on, called the Silver Swans, there was the players were called by a village elder to find a swan, which was taken from their pond. And the villagers called the swan the Silver Swan because they believed that the swan was an omen of good fortune, because the day after the swans arrived, they found this large silver mine, this silver vein in the mountain. So the swan didn't actually have anything to do with that, but still the people treat the swan as if it did. So that's how far I'm willing to go with my superstition. And the players are basically trying to find a useless swan, but it's not useless to those people because they believe it to be of great significance to their village.
So it's not like baked. Pardon me. It's not baked into the campaign setting. It gets used in your game, just not baked in.
Yeah, you can. Well, you can go as far with it as you yourself want. We're not trying to tell anyone. Because the book is for 3.5, we assume that most people reading it are diehard old school D&D players, and we assume that most people have a very unique play style to them, which they find are comfortable with. So we don't want to tell anyone to do anything. We want people to give their own twist on our idea.
So do you guys have any iconic characters, whether they're NPC heroes or villains? I know you mentioned the one lich, but are there any others that stand out as well?
Yeah, there's a Fainamoinen, who is based on a Finnish Norwegian folk hero, and he is basically a bard and a favorite among the gods, among the mother deity. And he is this. He used to be. He's immortal, so he used to be a ruler for a very long time, and he basically weaned the people, the humans, away from the strict rules of the north, and he brought them to the forests, more to the south, and he encouraged people to rule themselves, and he did so for a couple of hundred of years. And he now, one of the things in the campaign is that he recently, like years ago, retired, and now there's a new ruler, and we don't know if he's strong enough to keep people together and to have the respect of all people. I think he's a cool character, and he's got his magical equipment. He's got his singing great maul, and he's got a shimmering armor that has busty ladies on it to distract his enemies. He's got a cool beard like you. He's a cool character.
Thanks. So you said your campaign has existed for like 7-8 years now. Have you had one group running through for that whole time, or has it been multiple campaigns?
Yeah, we did multiple campaigns. I did. I probably did about 10 or 12 separate campaigns. Some of them lasted for 2 years. Some of them lasted for a couple of months. Different groups, different people. Groups play testing, of course, because there's a lot of stuff to play test, and you got to roll those dice.
So do you have any favorite groups of all the ones that have gone through?
Yeah, we have. We used to play on a Saturday, or when people didn't all have jobs and things they had to tend to, and families and obligations. That was a nice group. That was a cool group, and we had a lot of fun. And Dan, the guy who did all the image engineering, is also part of the group, and so was my wife. So that was like really close family group. We had a lot of fun playing every Saturday, and we even used to start in the afternoon, and then after dinner eat dinner together, and then after dinner play for a couple of hours. So that was fun.
Yeah, that's what our group used to be. Every Saturday for about 5 years, we would meet religiously.
Yeah.
You order dinner and then game from like 4 or 5 in the afternoon till anywhere from midnight to 6 in the morning, depending.
Good times.
Good times, yeah, the good old days. So, what are some of the challenges that you've had to overcome with coming up with your own setting? Are there any things that you've like were in there for part of it and you just had to totally scrap, or directions you would like to go in that you haven't gone yet?
There was. Well, we're Dutch, so we're very open-minded in points of there being not swearing, but explicit content. Where we're also, I'm always playing with adults, so there was some explicit content in there, and Wizards of the Coast has a really strict set of rules that you have to follow before you can officially publish one of their books in 3.5. So we had to tone down and some images. For example, we had some elven nudity in there, which we had to get rid of, because we thought it makes sense for elves to be very closely connected to nature and then not caring much about covering up their bodies at all. So we had to get rid of the elven nudity, unfortunately. There was some. We wanted to make the evil religions and their rituals feel like very evil. So there was some cannibalism stuff, orgy-related stuff in there, which we also got rid of. We basically took it as a notch down on some of those parts. So that was, and also what a really big challenge is reading through all of the stuff you've written and making sure that it's consistent, because it's now a book of almost 250 pages. And you write it over such a long course of time that you start messing things up and you start forgetting things. So we did a couple of sessions when we got back together, and we had to put notes next to each other and make sure that we're not messing anything up and we're not writing that A happened here and that B happened there. And that was also it's for 2 people, it's a lot of work.
Aside from the Wizards of the Coast and the OGL, it probably just makes sense to tone down some of the stuff anyway to reach a broader audience. So you don't have angry parents reaching out to you.
Well, yeah, we're kind of we're kind of struggling with that, because the 5th edition books, well, because we've written it, we've been working on it for so long. When we started on it, 3.5 was still the edition to play. And then 4th edition came, and 5th edition came, and 4th edition didn't really catch on very much, but 5th edition got so big, and now we're basically making a VHS tape when people are watching Blu-rays out there, or something, or Super Nintendo game when people are already going to PlayStation 3. So sometimes we feel like we're kind of a step behind with this, but hey, we're finally done. It's finally completely done. So we thought we might as well see if there's a market out there and whether or not people would be interested in seeing old school 3.5 stuff. And if there's not, then we can always convert to 5th edition. We're not averse to that. So
yeah, well, plenty of people are playing Pathfinder, and I feel like there's plenty of people that still play 3.5. Have you hit up any of the groups on Facebook that are like strictly 3.5? They do exist.
Yeah, we try to get the word out as much as possible. So if people have suggestions, I'd be happy to.
So Fantasy
talk
Ground
to
College wants to know if you guys are doing anything with rune magic in there.
Rune magic. No, we don't have any rune magic at the moment, but sounds interesting. So might be something that we're interested in. So please send us an email or reach out to us, and we might be able to help each other out, get that into an expansion in the future.
So Evil Silly Putty 3.5 is all that I play. Our channel, we play 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. We talk about that a lot. We've played every edition of the game. If you look over my right shoulder, there's a stack of 5th edition books. Look over my left shoulder, there's a stack of 4 ebooks. If if I was to flip the camera around, you can see some bookshelves that have 3rd edition books on them. And we've always said, like, there's people playing every edition. There are still people playing 1st edition, 2nd edition, all the editions. There are people playing OSR games that are based off the basic rules. So there's a game out there for everybody. So it's just a matter of finding them, and is there enough of them?
Yeah, that's the point. When we were making the book, when we started making the book, it was for ourselves. We didn't have our own pockets, and we wanted to make it because we thought it was cool. But now that we've actually turned into a company, we also have to look at the market and whether or not there's a place for us in that market. So I'm not a businessman myself, so it's I'm a writer, so it's not easy. But that's what you got to do when you're running a company. You have to look at the market and see if there's a place for you in that market.
It's it's one of those things you're figuring it out as you go. So how are you enjoying 5th edition compared to 3rd edition or any of the other editions?
I'm enjoying it. I'm kind of an old grump, so when something new comes out, I'm always skeptical at first. But to be honest, I'm enjoying it very much. I think it's awesome, 5th edition. I think it's really clear, really simple, really easy to pick up. I think it's very, very much easier to play, to learn, to generate characters. Everything they've made so easy, and I think that's one of the main reasons why it's so popular right now. It's so easy to get into.
Well, they've really like have tapped into the nostalgia of previous editions. I've said, and I like to say, when 5th edition came out, it realized what I missed from 1st and 2nd edition when I moved to 3rd. It wasn't apparent, when 3rd came out, it was like, oh, we got all these choices now, and we can customize these characters, and we can do all these things, and everyone's character felt so much different than when we were doing it in 2nd edition. And then 4th they moved in a completely different direction, and then 5th they scooped up everything that was good in all the previous editions and put them into it, and they're just like, well, what really makes something D&D, and kind of like put that in there.
Yeah, they extracted all the good stuff. They did that really well. Yeah.
What about other RPGs? Do you play any other RPGs?
Well, I love RPGs, so I have played. I've got the Army of Darkness RPG standing in my closet, and I still got to run a game for that sometimes. We've been playing some GURPS way back, and GURPS is fun, but it's super complicated. Very hard to build a character for that, so that it sort of limits who you can play with, and yeah, in that way. We've played some Doomtown, some Savage Worlds. I think that's an amazing setting. Savage Worlds also like very easy to get into, very quick to generate a character. We've played 1st edition D&D as well. We do. I neglected to mention it first when you asked about the games I'm running, because it's so different from other D&D. We're actually running a 1st edition campaign for the original D&D called the Keep on the Borderlands, which I'm running with some friends, but we play it really silly. So we drink a lot of beer, and all of our characters have like weird names. And I generate all the names of villains and stuff randomly, so that also gets really like hilarious sometimes. They had like this treasure carrier called Cobra, who was always pouncing for the treasure, stuff like that. Like we play it silly, and we call it Keep on the Murderlands actually, because so many characters died. But yeah, that's we play that as well. So yeah, plenty of role-playing games to go around, I guess.
Kenyatta, first edition. What's your class, elf? See, that's a misconception. There was Dungeons and Dragons, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and then there was basic Dungeons and Dragons. And AD&D came out, and you picked your class and your race just like you do now. It was then they came out with basic, and that's when they kind of pulled back. And like your class was your race and your class were the same thing. And it was designed to be an introduction to Dungeons and Dragons, but it kind of took on its own life of itself.
Yeah, that's like the one where you're either a halfling or a thief. You cannot be both.
Yeah, except for all thieves. All halflings are thieves, but not all thieves are halflings.
Touché.
But yeah. So we had Fragments are on, and he writ like all those. He was the one that did all the basic line, which were great. I love the cover on the box sets, and they were a lot of fun. And we played them both kind of like side by side. But that, I think like for a lot of us getting that, seeing the red box for the first time was that like that moment when like you kind of like you knew you were a gamer or not when you first saw, you saw the image of the dragon and the warrior.
Yeah,
but
we kind of want to go back to that. When you see a guy with a big shield and a sword, you want to know he's a warrior, and that's like that traditional part of fantasy. That's one of the things that really drew me. Well, it really urged me to create this, go back to the basics with this setting.
So, and well, I guess that's the other thing too. Like, what do you consider the basics?
The basics. So the what I consider the basics is that there's mostly humans, there's elves, there's dwarfs. There is some other fantasy stuff, but it's rare, very rare, or less common. There's the basic class, the 12 classes. Most people are going to be a warrior. Most people are going to be a wizard or a sorcerer, but like no advanced classes like hex blades or dragonborn. It's all pretty much back to a simpler time, to a gentler time. Well, actually, it was a much harsher time. It was a time when you didn't get free resurrections from your patron when you die.
So basically, low fantasy.
Yeah, more Tolkien-esque and less of the Eberron or something. Not that Eberron isn't cool, by the way. I love Eberron, but there's a time and place for everything.
And that's just it. It's just another play style, and it's not so much about right or wrong. It's just what does your group like? What as a GM, what do you like to run? As a player, what kind of game do you want to play in? And there's so many different flavors, and that's the great thing about this hobby, that you can. There's so many different ways to do it. There's no right or wrong if you guys are having fun.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. You should have fun. That's the goal of the game, right?
That's exactly it. That's why we do it. We're adults playing make-believe. So with that brings us right up to the hour. Guys, there are links in the description. Check out Urin's stuff. Check out the Kickstarter. Check out the Google Drive, where you can see sample pages. They look fantastic, as well as follow him on Facebook. And I want to thank you for hanging out with me today. I want to thank everyone for showing up in the chat and asking great questions and hanging out. Till next time, guys, stay nerdy.